2, 1. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us live this afternoon. And if you're listening in later, watching a snippet, this recording was conducted on February 27th, 2025. We're here with the one, the only John Wiley. And John, maybe before we get started, we're going to get you to do a brief introduction of yourself. Tell us a little bit about, where you come from, what do you want to be when you grow up, all of the above, John. Tell us more.
Well, thanks very much, and terrific to be here with you guys. So John Wiley, 35 years as a global management consultant. I hesitated to say that, but anyways, working primarily with natural resources companies for a 70-year-old operational consulting firm, which is traded on the London Stock Exchange. I ended up being the managing director for their natural resources group, and they were generating roughly about, we worked with the majority of the large mining companies, mining and oil and gas, some utilities, upstream and downstream, diamonds, base metals, precious metals, mostly operational improvement and productivity.
Awesome. And what do you do these days, John? What are you up to?
Okay, now I'm the senior advisor for Cotter Inc. So Cotter Consulting is based on started by John Cotter and Kathy Gertsch. It's based on John's research into change and how you manage change and lead through change. So it's science-based and actually really interesting. So the differentiator, I would say, between operational consulting and what Cotter is doing is that Cotter is working with people, and generally operational consulting works with systems, management operating systems, or mine operating systems, which they use to create or get a certain type of behavior.
That's right.
And it's very top down and push driven. Cotter, on the other hand, is really talking about creating alignment and engagement and promoting understanding, and generally getting the people who are working in the business to come up with the solutions and to implement them. So much more, much friendlier, and by the way, moves a lot faster.
It does, yeah. So absolutely. Our PACE practice is 100% focused on change management and very much respect the work that Cotter has been doing, really informing the industry in actually getting the realizing the benefits of the change, right? is realizing the benefit of the operational improvement, because you can go in and do operational improvement and you could say, oh, you know what, by the way, here's millions of dollars in unlocked efficiency sitting there. But if you can't convince the people to go ahead and make and realize that improvement, you just wouldn't see it. So very lucky to have you on here, John, and it's so great that you're working on the other side with Cotter. I call it the other side because oftentimes operational excellence consultants don't get to see the change management side. And so it's really nice to have that for Cotter and yourself over there. So today we're about to dig a little deeper into, a very topical subject. And John and I did do a bit of a rehearsal before we got in here. And John, you were talking about some recent news that we were, that just got released February 13th, I believe. And tell us a little bit about, what we're looking at on the screen here.
Well, okay, absolutely. So firstly, this is a global market intelligence report that's put together by S&P Global. And you can download it. You can go to their site and download it, and it's public knowledge, so it's not like we're expropriating any IP. S&P Global produces commodity insights across a number of different commodities. We're just looking right now at gold, at the precious metals market, which everybody I would say would generally say is a lagging indicator, as opposed to say copper or some of the base metals, which might be leading indicators. They are identifying a couple of 2 or 3 risks or threats to the industry. So with the way that the reason that we started talking about this was we started talking about how dynamic natural resources companies are, or to a certain extent how dynamic extractive companies are. And because decision making is generally a longer lead time, you have large projects that you're putting in place. The average mine takes over 10 years to develop and permit and things like that, regardless of the jurisdiction. Some obviously longer in others. So how reactive and adaptive can a natural resources company be? I think that what we were saying now was that we need to see we're moving into a period of uncertainty, and we're going to be required to be a lot more adaptive. And the price volatility that we're seeing right now, and S&P has done a great job of taking 3 years. So the green line is the gold price in US dollars an ounce for 2023. And then the blue line is 2024. So right there, you can see a significant gap. And the average in 2023 was about 1,900 US dollars an ounce, and 2024 exited around 2025. No, 2,500.
Yeah,
So,
and that's a massive jump. That's like a
right. And then we started off 2025, and we're just broaching 2,900. So another $400 an ounce. So a couple of 2 or 3 things are an indicator, and they call this out. So gold breaches $2,800 an ounce as the U.S. president announces and then retracts tariffs. That uncertainty, causes markets, and gold is an economic metal, meaning that people are buying it to hedge inflation and do a number of other things, as well. It's an industrial metal to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So that price volatility and that increase, that jump, and as well, by the way, we could have looked at steel, aluminum, as well, because there will be some other negative trends as well.
Yeah.
This is the yield on the T-bills, the Treasury bills. So I think that what we're saying is we're seeing a price inflation. Well, we're seeing a price increase for gold.
Yeah.
The demand side is driving that. We are as tariffs. Sorry, I don't mean to just here.
Continue. So, but basically, John, what I wanted to do is I just wanted to define tariffs for the people that are joining the call. So we have people from all different organizations joining the call, and I have a little line excerpt here. So tariffs are tax on imported goods paid by the person or company that imports them. The cost of the tariff is typically passed on to the consumer in the receiving market in the form of higher prices, similar to a sales tax. If the US moves forward with tariffs on Canadian products and Canada imposes counter tariffs, Canadian consumers will experience higher prices when purchasing goods imported from the US, as well as for domestically produced goods with American components. So, some of the tariff impacts could be a decrease in sales for local businesses who export significantly to the US, higher prices for products imported from the US, or a decrease in sales for local businesses that sell US products due to inevitably higher prices. So that is really the context of tariffs, and that is why we're doing this webinar today. Is if you are forced, or if you want to stay price competitive and sell, still sell to your consumers and still be competitive against other businesses, how do you do that? And so, with John's experience in operational consulting, we thought it'd be a really topical conversation for us to dive into today. And what John just finished talking about was the market volatility. So, nothing has changed since you watched the news this morning. So we're not here talking about any breaking news or anything like that. We're just here to talk about how do you mitigate that market uncertainty. How do you take advantage of that market certainty? So, John, we spoke a little bit when we did our prep call around the concept of adaptive versus bureaucratic organizations, right? So tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me a little bit more about, which type of organization, what do you mean by an adaptive organization? What do you mean by a bureaucratic organization? And what type of organization will truly be able to weather the storm of this market uncertainty that we're just talking about?
Okay, so good question. So the gold price is just one example of an indicator that is reflecting market uncertainty. The reason that the gold price is going up is people are moving dollars into, or they're buying gold, whether it's physical gold, or they're buying gold ETFs, or buying into gold companies. Likewise, money is moving out of other stocks or other forms of investment. So as an investor, there's uncertainty, and also if you're running a company, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty because your input costs due to tariffs are potentially going to increase. So how do you manage these periods of uncertainty is to become adaptive. Now, so if we want to look at sort of like an alpha and an omega, a bureaucratic organization is an organization that is built to maintain and consistently deliver predictable results to a certain extent. It's based on policies. Examples are large multinationals that really focus on, this is the way that we do things around here. Decision making is generally done at senior levels. There's long-term strategies. People look at whether or not decisions are in line with a strategy. There's a budget. You're making decisions based on your spend allotment or your spend decision making, and you're trying to manage outcomes.
And that's mostly a public sector, nonprofit, well-governed organizations or bureaucratic organizations, right? So indigenous.
No, I would disagree. I would say there's
Okay.
lots of very normal, like natural resources companies can be bureaucratic as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What defines a bureaucratic organization is decisions being made centrally or at the top.
Mm-hmm.
You have strong policies.
Yeah.
You have to follow the policy, and it's sort of like the policy is more important than the outcome. Did you do exactly what was required? Did you follow all of the policies? Great. Okay, that is the primary. That's what we want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it's not just government or nonprofit that is bureaucratic. Obviously there is some similarities, but you can have publicly held companies that are bureaucratic as well.
So What's your best example, John, of an adaptive organization? Do you have any that you've worked with that you're like, this type of organization or this particular company, do you know of any that come to mind that give you good examples of the opposite of a bureaucratic organization?
So generally, the private equity organizations working on innovative. So you would look at Procter and Gamble and Johnson and Johnson, and you'd say those are bureaucratic organizations. They're large. They're a large pharmaceutical. But if you look at the guys that had to pivot quickly and react to COVID, the guys that had to created the vaccines and things like that, those are
Yeah.
adaptive
Yeah.
organizations. And I think that COVID illustration, or that period of time, really challenged a lot of organizations to say, how do I become more adaptive quickly? And so that in a lot of cases for COVID, organizations were doing things dramatically different, and they were proving to themselves that they could react quickly. And I think that period of time, if we hold that period of time in mind, we can align, we can work together really quickly and really effectively to confront an external or existential threat. I think Canadians and Canadian business and worldwide, globally, we are all going to be reacting to the U.S. decisions around tariffs. Whether you're Canada and Mexico, which is but you could easily be in the UK or in the Eurozone. There's we're all in the same basket as far as Donald Trump is concerned, where he's saying, I'm going to put I'm going to put reciprocal tariffs on you. This is, so if you're charging me a certain amount of money, I'm going to charge you. And by the way, Canada doesn't have any tariffs on. We're so integrated with the U.S. that there's free trade essentially, and we negotiated free trade, but without making any political decisions or statements around why are we getting rid of that free trade? We're now going to be taxed. There's a tariff. So I think that what we want to do is we want to look at how do we react to that? How do we become more adaptive quickly? And I think that we start to look at how do we react? So a bureaucratic is efficient, but it has tight strictures and rigid decision making and working processes. So in order to be effective and adaptive, we're going to have to break that, and we're going to have to do it in a controlled manner in order to adapt quickly.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think Maz just threw a scrolling thing down there, our coordinator, in terms of if you want to do we do have part of our service for Digital First, the way we make money is we do a thing called a rapid process transformation. So what John is talking about is the willingness to adapt, because if you have a process, that's a good thing, because that means that you can create a new version of the process. But the willingness, if you have an organization that has a willingness to adapt and want to do a quick adaptation, it's basically, how do you do that? And one of the services that Digital First offers is that. So thank you, Mas, for that.
And then I think just to your point, when an organization is confronted with an issue, one of the first things that happens is it has to recognize the issue.
Yeah.
And then it has to say, well, what am I going to do to confront or overcome or adapt? How am I going to manage this? How am I going to de-risk this? So we have to recognize it. Then we have to talk about actions. Those are on the strategic side, and then we have to implement. We have to mobilize and implement. That period of time, that mobilization, is what we're trying to compress. For an adaptive organization, what we want people to do is we want to be able to communicate really effectively around why do we need to change, because people need to understand the reason why, and
Correct. Yeah.
why do we need to do it now? Why is it now as opposed to some other time, some future time? Why do we need to change? Why do we need to do it now? That change management, that um, so Cotter has 20 years, over 20 years of research, and they talked
Yeah,
about
for
how
sure.
how people perceive and react to threat. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
the great thing is that as individuals, we are constantly aware and constantly on the lookout for threats.
Hmm.
We're programmed that way.
Yeah.
And we perceive a threat, we can either go into survive mode, where you close down your innovative thinking, and it's fight or flight. You are narrowing your perceptions, you are narrowing your decisions. The thrive mode is where you recognize that there is a change, but you don't necessarily perceive it as a threat, because you understand that you can adapt.
Hmm.
So if you think about the messaging that's going on right now, there's a lot of messaging going on around that is forcing us to perceive and understand threats, and the
Hmm.
volatility is out there.
Yeah.
What I think that what I'm trying to say is, guys, understand that that is occurring, but we have an opportunity, and we have overcome these types of existential problems previously, and COVID is just the most recent example.
Hmm. We have a question from our audience, and the question is from Jake Tapper, who I may or may not be related to, but I'm surprised that he's attending the call. And the question is: a world in which two-way trade takes up a smaller share of GDP is one in which each country shifts away from what's relatively good at making and was exporting towards activities where it's relatively less competitive and had previously relied on imports. Lots of business will be going to inefficient producers with lots of demand to become more competitive. So that's Jake Tapper is not the news anchor, by the way. It's just someone that's related to me in this part of the world. So yeah, thank you, Jake, for your input. Appreciate it.
Well, I
So
think
yeah,
Jake makes a you know Jake
yeah.
makes a very valid point. So
Mhm.
so primarily, the Canadian economy is based on natural resources. You could say it's an oil and gas, petroleum based economy to a great extent. Um, we haven't necessarily invested in uh, the types of nimble types of manufacturing types of things. So, pharma, bioscience, those types of things, where you're looking at taking discovery rapidly, um, innovating a proof, and then trying to bring that to market. And the margins on that are huge. The margins on pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, things like that are huge. We haven't done that. We haven't invested in that. There is an opportunity to do that, to stand that up. It'll take some time, but we have to recognize that in order to react to the American threat, our economies, which are so interlocked right now, with tariffs, unless we negotiate a free trade. And by the way, this is going to be bad for the Americans as well. I don't think that there's any way that they're exporting. We're the primary producer of their energy. If we start to put tariffs on them, that's going to make things more expensive for them. If this is not a win-win. This is a
Mhm.
lose-lose situation. But regardless, we need to start to look at how, this is just the beginning. We got another 4 years of
I
this.
think it's yeah, and I
We
think like
need to look at how are we going to become more adaptive.
it's like what I think is like there's different wake up calls, right? So COVID was a really good wake up call. It's great for the digital first business because we've been trying to pitch, hey, let's do online workshops. This like why are we spending so much money traveling and getting everybody in the same place. Let's do digital first workshops and things like that. And so we were doing that before COVID. Nobody understood why we were doing that. And now everybody's like, oh yeah, we need to do digital first workshops, and in-person engagements are for more meaningful work and things like that. And how many people are now working from home? I think this is the second wake-up call, regardless. I think the smart businesses, this is sort of that warning shot, right? So the smart adaptive businesses are going to take the time to leverage what they got to make those improvements. And I think it's not so much about Canada, US. That's not what the conversation here. The conversation here is there is uncertainty. This uncertainty just happens to be created with trade wars, of course. And that is one thing that's happening. But now the question is, how can you create an adaptive business regardless of the uncertainty, whether it was related to trade tariffs, whether it was related to any other black swan event that we can't even predict what's going to happen next, right? So the question, John, then in this case is transitioning into lean strategies, right? So in terms of organizations that haven't used lean before, that don't really necessarily understand what adaptive processes are, what continuous improvement is, or they use the word continuous improvement, but don't really understand the real application of it. And you've seen this over many, many, many years in your career, where you've gone into organizations and you've pretty much created massive amounts of improvement in existing operations where people thought, I don't think you could really make change. I think I'm running a pretty efficient organization. Thank you very much. Like, you think you're talking about lean. People say, do you know how lean I am? Do you know how few people I have to do different things? It's because a lot of your people are doing wasteful activities. And that's really what lean is about, is cutting waste, which is a topic of our conversation today. So John, based on your massive experience in the implementation of lean strategies, because you actually activated many, we're calling it lean, but lean type strategies, where you cut a lot of waste out of a lot of operations, where you increase a lot of safety in a lot of operations. Tell me a little bit in terms of, like, if an organization doesn't quite understand it and they're just using those terms willy-nilly, what are the initial steps to thinking about it or implementing it? Like, how does an organization really think about, how do I get to that level of adaptability? That's the first question I have.
Okay, so let's back up for a second. So lean is a group of concepts that are relatively fundamental. They're pretty straightforward. They're easy to understand. They're easy to articulate. Yeah. There's a great body of work that talks about, how would you apply lean to just about any environment. Their focus in lean is trying to create outcomes in the most effective way, which means let's reduce waste. Let's reduce complexity, because complexity causes waste to a certain extent. Let's simplify, and let's create a pretty straightforward end-to-end process that delivers an outcome, which is what we want. Okay. So lean comes after you've decided how you are going to react or adapt or whatever. So let's start off here. We're seeing some existential threats. We are hardwired to understand and perceive threats and to react. We've decided to react. We are mobilizing our organization, and now what we want to do is we want to create a tool to help the organization to work together across a common framework, with common language, with common understanding, with a common approach. This is how we are going to work together to achieve these outcomes. So lean by itself needs to be married with a communication package that talks about why are we doing this and why are we doing it now?
Mm-hmm.
As why are we doing this as opposed to the umpteen other things that we could do? Why do we need to do it now? So we either understand that there is a threat like COVID or a tariff, or this is the direction that we've decided to go. And why now, is a time frame type of thing. So the change process, which Cotter talks about in his 8 steps of change, the first one talks about creating a sense of urgency. You do that, and real urgency, and then you start to apply the lean principles so that you can have the organization working on common things. So lean, to a certain extent, it needs to have, it's a framework, it's a method, it's a tool. It needs to also be it needs to be augmented with the communication, and here's the reason why, and here's the direction that we're going, and here are the quick wins that we're looking for. And you see, the big thing about change is actually very difficult. It is an extremely difficult thing. It takes a lot of energy.
Yep.
Personal energy, organizational energy, and the thing about it is that we need to renew that energy. That's what, after we're creating the sense of urgency, and we're talking about how are we going to manage the change process, then we start measuring quick wins. Lean is also part of this. Lean talks about, the need to feed back to the people. First of all, you're engaging them in terms of how are we identifying waste, but then you're also talking about, here are the eight steps around creating change within the Cotter's framework. The quick wins that they're talking about is in that enable and generate.
Yeah, right here.
One of the failures of management consulting in general, operational consulting specifically, is that we fail to get a behavior change. We cause improvement through a system and a focus. We fail to get the behavior, and sometimes it's an IT system solution, type of thing. But we fail to get sustainable change for two reasons. First of all, we haven't taught the organization how to do this themselves. That's the first thing. And so they're looking for, we're using the external resources. And the second thing is that we have taken a moment in time, a period of time, and we've reacted to the conditions. So it's not sustainable because either outside conditions are going to occur, internal conditions are going to occur, whether it's a change in leadership or management, and people don't really understand why are we doing it this way, or they're bringing in their own systems or procedures or whatever. So something is changing. We're failing to sustain because we fail to adapt to that. Lean, we can go back to the lean principles and say, well, the reasons why we did these things, we removed this waste. You have to keep doing it because waste has a tendency to creep back in. The sustainability that Cotter is talking about is that you have to go back and you have to look at this again, and you have to redo it. You have to find the opportunities, and you have to get people to do it again.
Yeah, that's a really great point in terms of those, in terms of, if you don't know why you're doing it, you can't move forward, right? So this particular visual that's here is really to show the audience, when we say we're going to cut wastes, and if you think, oh, my operations are really efficient already, then are you saying that you have no defects in your organization? Or all your employees feel like their ideas are valued, or you have in just the right amount of inventory, and you're not overspending on inventory, or people are not traveling long distances, or you're not doing extra processing of work, right? So it's really around is just to do a little self-check to say, do I really feel there's opportunity for improvement? And this is basically becomes part of your vocabulary. So John, going back to the 8-step Cotter process where you talk about create a sense of urgency, which this, market conditions could be creating a sense of urgency if you're paying attention, and then building a guiding coalition. And I think that building the guiding coalition and forming that strategic vision to be an adaptive organization and in moving it forward. And then the next step is enlisting a volunteer army. And I think this is where the capacity building in your people is very valuable, right? So it's like when you have decided, so from the Cotter, from the top 3 Cotter principles, like, when you've decided as an organization, you're willing to do it. Why are you willing to do it? Why is this important to you? Then you get into understanding a little bit about, well, how do we get to it? Right. And then that's where our, like, we have a few events. If you guys are interested in checking it out, feel free to go check out our pace.global/events. And so it's to help different levels of leaders build their capacity in understanding the potential for improvement. So it's really around, that's when we say get your team. So in the Cotter thing, it says enlist a volunteer army. That's how you do it. And the only challenge with hiring, temporary operational excellence consultants, right, John, is really the lack of sustainability. So if you don't enlist your volunteer army, you don't train your own people to actually take advantage of these solutions to create those short-term wins, then you say, oh, you know what, the consultant could do it because they could sustain it. And I think that's what you're bringing to light, John, is the Cotter principles in terms of making sure that change actually sticks, making sure that you're actually moving it forward and things like that. So that's that was a very, very good a segue into it. I think we're very close to time. We're 3:37. It's usually a 45-minute thing. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions to see if anybody has any questions to add to the. Oh, we do have a question. So we had someone that says, how do you reduce uncertainty from any project? I have an opinion, but I want to hear John's opinion because he's our guest today. Tell us, John, how do you reduce uncertainty from any project?
So I think that you have to accept to a certain extent that projects are based on a design, and you put together a design at a point in time with the imperfect knowledge that you had, whether it's the imperfect knowledge that Metrolinx had of what the ground conditions are in Toronto. They ran into some soft zones. They weren't able to tunnel through them, whether it's where the volatility or the variance in any project comes from the unknowns.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm telling anybody anything here. It's not so much whether or not you are going to have unknowns. You are inevitably going to have unknowns. It is how quickly you identify and then react and manage them. So reducing uncertainty. You can manage project risk to a certain extent by having a ton of contingencies. I don't know whether that's necessarily what you want to do. One of the interesting things was that after you've done the first project, you get a lot smarter. And the next project that you do, you're a little bit more aware. How do you bring to bear that global knowledge of what can possibly happen in a project? And there's a number of different opportunities to do that. So I think here's my personal view. Spend more time planning. 1. 2, spend more time to a certain extent whether you're using Monte Carlo or whatever analysis that you want to do, gaming that plan. What are we going to do if these things happen, how am I going to mitigate that? And then work with a team. Typically, the project team are a group of individuals that have not worked together before, and they all have their own view around what what outcomes are they trying to manage to. So so when I was working in Oyu Tolgoi with the Rio Tinto guys on shaft sinking and putting together their project for the copper mine, one of the first things that we did was we talked about what is best for project. How are we all going to, in some cases, subliminate what we personally, as the mine operations guy or as the contractor or whatever, our personal outcomes that we're looking for in order for the group to achieve. Now, this is not an unusual thing, but that's one of the things that we did with the project people in order to improve the outcomes that the project was looking for. At that point in time, it was, increase the shaft sinking rate, increase the lateral development rate, those types of things. And by the way, they were the #1 underground safety performer.
Yeah. So I just put my answer up there. Basically, our simple answer, that's literally what we activate certainty is about, right? And so they say thank you to you, John. And it's basically about constantly evaluating risks. And there are 2 risks that, like, so our parent company, Pace Global, is only a people-focused company. So we're really looking at assessing the people and culture risk, which is really related to perception. So we were on a call recently and someone said, oh, we highlighted a perception risk for a certain individual, and they said, oh, you don't understand, they're really amazing, and it's just a perception. And I said, absolutely. Like, we're not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody loves John. Not everybody loves Neha. Not everybody loves whoever it is. But if you put someone in a particular position and the perception is going to actually potentially negatively impact a particular project, right? That's a risk that oftentimes is not managed because we're just saying, oh, but John is the best suited to lead project X. But if John's not well liked, do you want to really keep John in that leadership role and run the project? And this is a type of risk, John, that no one really talks about. The project perception, the people risk, and the culture risk is something that are 100% unknown because you cannot plan for it. You cannot plan for people playing well in the sandbox. You cannot plan for people not getting along, for someone rubbing the other person the wrong way because they said the wrong thing in a different thing. Like when the project environment, when I talk about a mining project environment, John, this is how I describe it. I describe it as like people from imagine there's a plot of land and people from a whole bunch of different countries come and then they settle down on this plot of land and they all speak different languages. They use different tools. They all believe in the same thing, but they do things differently. And then somehow we think that multi-billion dollars will solve the problem of people just communicating and getting on the same page and getting aligned, and you don't. It doesn't work that way. There's project contingency for a reason because we don't ever plan for the people and the perception risk. And that's where Cotter comes from, is really coming to it's 90% of your uncertainty is in the people and perception and how you mitigate that, where you take it from there. That's my thought, John. And I got some of the data from Roy Slack around capital projects and mining, and a huge amount of a big chunk of the projects that weren't successful had a lot of people, culture, there's some like honesty, like those kinds of like very intangible components that put a project in significant risk and caused delays on particular projects. So
certainly I would agree that, listen, your design, if you're building a reverse osmosis plant, you can, it's a pretty straightforward design, or whether or a copper flotation circuit, whatever. a sag mill. So you can, your design is pretty good. The volatility, the variability is typically the project group of people haven't worked together, have a group of differing solutions and backgrounds, are not necessarily most effective. At the people engagement side of things, they may be very good at their engineering side of things, but that doesn't necessarily make them a good team player. So that strong team capability is important.
Yep.
Not everybody is a good project person either.
No.
So, projects are, relatively short, intense periods of time. I want to say relatively short. They should be relatively short. But I would also have to say that projects can be better by having a common understanding of what the outcomes that we're all working towards are, trying to reduce turnover of the management team, and doing some team building exercises as part of it. Those are all great things.
Absolutely. So if anybody's looking to get a hold of John, there's John's email address, john.wiley@cutterinc.com. And yeah, reach out to John, say hello. If you're looking to understand a little bit about lean strategies and lean leadership, then go to our website, parent website, pace.global/events. There's a few Eventbrite events. I think we are hosting in Ottawa, Toronto, Sudbury, and Timmins. So hope to see you at one of them. And we also have an online one if you guys can't make it in person. But hey, it's a very interactive event, and we have some of the best trainers and facilitators around. So hope to see you guys there. And John, once again, thank you so much for agreeing to come on this call. We're so lucky to have benefited from your experience today.
Well, thank you very much, Neela. It's been great chatting with you.